This week I brought Rhinar to Blitz. Let's see how we did. Hi friends, welcome back to Nearly Same Games. I'm Neil, and this is the Armory Report. Now this week was Blitz for the Armory Event, and I decided to build a new Rhinar deck, sort of based on the commoner decks that I've been building. So let's take a look at the deck tech. Alright, let's take a look at this deck. First off, we're going to start with our hero. We're going to be using Rhinar. This is modeled after my Levia commoner deck, my Levia +6 commoner deck, but we're going to go with a full brute Rhinar build. Now, Rhinar's ability is whenever you discard a card with 6 or more power during your action phase, Intimidate. This gives us a little bit extra of messing with our opponent's hand. We don't want to intimidate their entire hand just to push through damage early on necessarily, but if we do get some intimidation, if we can screw up which card they want to block with, that's what we want, but we still want to pull cards out of their hands. We want to make their turns less good and our turns to still be good with a 2 or 3 card hand. For the weapons, we're going to be using Mandible Claws. They are 2 resources to attack, and if you've discarded with a card with power 6 or more this turn, then it gets go again. These can be really nice for a little bit of go wide action. If we can manage to discard a card early, we'll get the Intimidate, be able to swing the Claw, and then be able to follow up with another big hit or another Claw. For our equipment, first off, we're going to have Goliath Gauntlet. This is going to be used for matchups that need to have extra push-through power with potentially having a lot of defense. This isn't our primary attack, but I'm planning to use this in, for instance, the Ninja match, where I want to push additional pressure. I want to try to pull additional cards from their hand and potentially have a decent follow-up turn after that. If I can pull a lot of cards from their hand, if they can have a low power attack that turn and be able to come back and continue with 4 card hand pressure. That's the hope anyway. We're running Hope Merchant's Hood. This is very nice for if we have a bad hand, if we don't manage to have blues, we can pop this and shuffle any number of cards back into our deck and draw that many cards, and it can help us get out of bad situations. We want to make sure we always have this if we're fighting a Kano. And speaking of Kano, we have the robe, the gloves, and the boots. We're running 3 pieces of Null Rune. If we do run into Kano, it is Blitz, so that's very possible. We run a lot of blues. We want to make sure that we don't run anything but Hope Merchant's Hood in that case, so we can shuffle away our hand and potentially get blues if we're facing a big attack. Very important that when fighting wizards that we hold on to blues and we really manage our attacks. That might be a lot of throwing claws at them and nothing else and passing our turn, because we want to make sure that we have enough arcane barrier to fight off the attack during our turn. Now, the most common equipment that I want to use, we're going to start with Skullcap. This may switch out between this and Hope Merchant's Hood, but having additional block is very nice, and this can block for 2 and then 1. Very good. Arcane Barrier 3, generally not what we want to use, but the block, having the block is very good. For the chest piece, we're going with Tunic. We want to get that additional resource. It can help. We have a lot of 3 attacks and blues. There's possibility though that we can have a 3 attack and have a red hand or a hand that has a yellow card that we need to pitch, and being able to smooth out those attacks will be helpful. Scabskin Leathers, of course, the best brute legs to wear. Having the battle worn 2 blocks and then 1 block allows us to have some great armor. That's primarily the use, but there is a chance that we're going to use the once per turn action to roll a d6 and potentially gain action points for that. We don't have a lot of great hands for that, but in the cases that we do, there's potential that we can use that, use an attack, and follow up, and you also use claws, or potentially do a double claws turn, or there are chances that we could find a use for that. And along with that, you have the Gambler's Gloves, chance to re-roll one of our poor rolls. If we roll a 1, we can pop this and get another roll. You want to be very cautious on how much rolling that you do. You don't want to be too aggressive. You want to make sure that you have the hand for that roll. So to start with our attacks, we're going to start with Alpha Rampage. This is a Rhinar specialization, but it is not legendary. This is a 9 power attack with a cost of 3 and discarding a card. And remember, if we discard a power 6 or greater, we will intimidate. This also has intimidate. So there's potential that we get a double intimidate out of this, which is very good. It's a little scary going up to, this requires us to have 3 cards in order to play. But this is also a 3 block, which also serves with our defend with 2 cards and attack with 2 cards kind of mentality. So if we can get this and have 3 cards available, that's great. If we can add this in with the Goliath Gauntlet, then we're talking about an 11 power attack, which is really good. If we can't, it's okay that we can just defend with this for 3. Next up, we have our Wrecker Rops. We're going with 2 red and 2 blue. And this is another card that we need 3 cards to do the attack with. We need to pay for this, which costs 2. And we need to discard a random card. But this is an 8 power attack, which is stronger than our normal attacks. And it also defends for 3. The blue version also attacks for 6. It's a great card that if we happen to discard, also activates our Rhinar ability. A lot of great things going on with this card. If we need to block with it, we can do that. I'm always happy to do that. Great card to have. Next off, we've lost our Lunar Tide Plunderer, so we need a replacement for that. And that replacement is Barraging Brawnhide. Now, this is a 3-cost attack. It attacks for 7. It also has the ability, if it was defended by less than 2 non-equipment cards, it has +1. So this can be an 8. It only blocks for 2, but I think we're okay with that. I think the ability is relevant here, and we'll tend to pull more cards from our opponent's hand. They don't want to have that extra damage. It's over the threshold of just playing 2 cards and being able to block it out unless you have a defensive reaction. So the potential that we can pull 3 cards from their hand is pretty good. We're only running the reds because it does only block for 2, but 7 power attack for that. Then we have our perfectly vanilla Raging Onslaught. This is a 7 power attack for a 3 cost. It also blocks for 3. Our blue version attacks for 5, but also blocks for 3. We like to have that 3 block, so we can either use this to block or to attack with. Pretty powerful card, goes with our 2 and 2 kind of mentality for this deck. Next up, we have Riled Up. Again, same kind of thing. We block for 3. We cost 3 to attack with. And at the red, it's a 7 power attack. And on the blue, it's a 5 power attack. There is a slight chance that we can have a discarded card with power 6 or more to give this +1, but unlikely. We'd have to roll Scabskins for that. We'd have to have a 5-card hand to make all of this work, probably. But this also still works works in our plan just fine. Next up, we have one of my favorite cards, Smash Instinct. This does everything we want it to do. It is a 7 power attack with Intimidate, and the Intimidate, again, having 1 Intimidate there is very good. Let's mess up your hand and not let you block with what you want to block with. You get a random card that gets set aside. You do get that card back, so that they will have that card back to swing back at us, but it's very potentially very devastating if we get the right card out of their hand. Again, a 3-cost attack and a 3 defense. This does all the things that we want it to do. Happy with that in the red and the blue, 2 of each. And continuing on with our Levia deck +6 is our Barraging Beatdown. These are the rares that we brought in for our Levia deck, and they've done very well for us. The fact that this is a 0 cost and allows us to intimidate is great, because whenever we have it in our hand, we can potentially use it. This will give us a bonus if they don't block with 2 cards from hand, and if we can get enough to intimidate in there, we can potentially not allow them to block enough from their hand and really get some big bonuses going in there. Not very likely, but there's potential that we are able to Barraging Beatdown, and Smash Instinct, pull 3 cards from their hand, and they will not be able to meet that requirement, and so they'll have this big plus on top of it. It doesn't have to be from hand, so if they have a card from a defense reaction from Arsenal, they can still prevent that extra bonus damage in that situation, but it's going to make things difficult for them. And that's why I like this card. It still blocks for 3, so we can always use it for that. Blue can always be used for fuel if we need it. So very happy with that card. Next up, we go with our defense reactions. We're running 2 Sink Belows, a Fate Foreseen, and a red Unmovable. All these are red defense reactions. Defend for 4, defend for 4. Cost 3, but defend for 7, potentially 8 if it's from Arsenal. I think these are necessary. You will need to do some blocking, and I like this kind of distribution of having 3 of these that are 0 cost, block for 4, and then the Unmovable, which costs a little bit extra but can potentially block a big attack. Next up, we still have our pummel package, except I've replaced our yellow pummels with Blood Rush Bellow. Blood Rush Bellow can be an excellent turn, an excellent card. It costs us 1, and we have to discard a card. But if we do discard a card with power 6 or more, we draw 2 and get go again. You always want to make sure that you can line that up so that you are discarding a 6 power card. And if you do, all your brute attacks gain +2 this turn, and your claws count as brute attacks. So if we can set this up correctly, then we have an excellent turn potentially ahead of us. If we can't set it up, it does still block for 3. So Pummel is kind of a difficult card to set up in this deck with the scenario of blocking 2 and attacking with 2. You need a 4-card hand to use Pummel. Sometimes they can be a little bit awkward. Pummel's only defend for 2, so I really like putting Blood Rush Bellow in that slot in place of the yellow Pummels. But we're still going to run the blue Pummels, great for pitch. The red Pummels too are excellent to Arsenal. They work really well. This doesn't work with our claws, but still happy to have it. Any of our 3 power attacks do excellent with Pummel, and there's potential that we can use Tunic to help us pay for this. A Tunic trigger and a red card can also pay for Pummel, so there's potential that we can use that. Last up, we have our fuel. Lead the Charge still in here. All of our cards, or most of our attacks, cost 2 or greater. so we can play this, play one of our attacks, get an extra action point, potentially throw a clause in afterwards, or another big attack. I don't generally like to arsenal this card. It is blue pitch. Even though it only defends for 2, it can get stuck in there, and there are times that the blue pitch is more important. I would much rather, for arsenal targets, I want to generally focus on a red attack or a pummel. I'm happy with a pummel sitting in there until it's available, or a red attack, which I can pop out immediately. I'll generally try to lead the charge in my hand if it's not going to be used for fuel or for blocking. Only blocks for 2, cost of doing business, I think that's okay. And then we have our Blood Rush Bellow. You need to discard a card, but the next brute attack gains +3. Again, that attack can go with our claws, and there's potential that we discard a 6-power card, which would trigger Intimidate, and then we can throw a 6-power clause at them with Go Again. So there's potential to combo off of this. In the end, though, it is blue pitch for fuel, and it is a 3 block for us if we need it. And that's our deck. All right, now let's take a look and see how our Rhinar deck went. Now, the first round, I was against Katsu. That is the thing I wanted to see probably the least. And I decided to go with the skull cap for this. I was looking for the additional block. I'm not sure that was necessarily the right plan. While it was good to have extra block, I did have an all red hand, which didn't do me any favors. And this time I was very conscious that I wanted to be very aggressive. And this means that I decided to take bigger hits on my turn, or on his turn, in order to come back with a 4-card hand that can do damage and potentially have more power than he has block for. And I think that worked pretty well. I did have a nice big hit that I used Goliath Gauntlets to pump up a 7 attack, and I was able to add a red pummel on top of that, which he was not expecting, and that kind of messed up his hand a little bit, and I think that worked pretty well for that. Overall, though, it's Ninja. I have a difficult time playing against him, and we were at 3-2. I was at 2 life. He threw an E-Strike at me. I blocked it, but then he added a Razor Reflex to it and took me out in the end. So, first round I lost. Second round was against a KO, which was interesting. And I feel like I should have won this match, but I didn't. And he didn't have especially good rolls, and I didn't have the hands to punish from that. I was trying to probably block more aggressively than I should have been. I had some really awkward hands. I did get a Blood Rush Bellows turn, and I ended up using an Alpha Rampage for that. And I probably shouldn't have done that. I probably should have gone with the Double Claws attack, even if I didn't have a follow-up for that. Probably a few different misplays here. We were 3-3 at the end, and he intimidated me. I double blocked his first attack, and then his final attack was a pulping that I just didn't have enough block for. So he won that match. My round 3 was against a Kano. Kano and Blitz is very, very strong. I'm not sure how I got paired up with him in round 3 in the losers bracket, but that's where we were. I tried to be aggressive and cautious as much as possible, but he was throwing some really big attacks at me that I blocked for 3, and I'm still taking 5 out of that attack. I only had 3 Null Rune, and I was using the Hope Merchant's Hood. I did pop the Hope Merchant's Hood at one point to get some better cards, but I'm really thinking that the 4 Null Rune might have been better. There were several times that he would attack for 4, and I was only able to block 3 of it, and he gets the on-hit effects from that extra hit that goes through. I did get him down to 1, but he came back and hit me for 8 when I was at 7, and I had only a red card in hand. Not much I can do. And I did get some awkward hands out of there. Some hands that I'm just have a bunch of reds. I was able to attack through one of those hands. I think I had a yellow and red that I was able to pitch to throw my red attack at him, and fortunately he blocked. He had a kind of a garbage hand for that, so that kind of worked, but in the end it didn't. So 3 losses for me there. And round 4 I was up against a Lightning Lexi. There were turns that I was blocking very heavily and ended up with a low pressure, here's some claws turn, which is not great. He had a couple of 3-of-a-kind turns that I'm taking some damage. I'm still throwing my 7 power attacks back as much as possible. And we both ended up with some bad hands and kind of stalled out for a little bit. I had a Blood Rush Bellows turn, and I ended up drawing no blues. I had 2 reds in hand. That was very awkward. And at the end of the round, he was at 2, I was at 4, and we went to time. So it ended up being a draw, which feels great for nobody. So overall, I went 0-4, which is a horrible record. And while I was playing, I noticed some things that just weren't working well for the deck. First off, Tunic is a waste. I wouldn't run Tunic again next time. There were a couple of times where I used the Tunic counter to get me kind of out of a bad hand, but that's not really what I wanted that to do. I ended up blocking with Tunic because I wasn't using the resource. Everything costs 3, so it's either a blue or we're not playing that for the most part. So I would have rather had Barkbone Strapping much more. I like it for the early block, and then to be able to roll for a resource or 2 when I need it. I think that works much better than trying to remember your Tunic counters. I don't think Gambler's Gloves worked real well for this particular build. There is not a lot of times that I really wanted 2 action points. There were some times that, looking back on it, I probably could have rolled Scabskins to try to get those 2 action points. I did roll Scabskins once, and I got a 2 on that, and just left it. Not a lot of times I had quite the hand that I needed to get the double attacks in there, or I was just going to be swinging claws in there. Which brings up another thing. I don't think claws was the right call for this particular deck. With the kind of concept of block 2, attack with 2, claws doesn't give me enough power. And I wasn't built around getting the discard, using the claws with the go again. And so I kind of had this mixed build in there, which didn't really work very well. And so I think in the future I would run Romping Club instead, and not do the claws. Speaking of which, I think Alpha Rampage was pretty good when I used it, but I don't think I would also have the red Wrecker Rump in there as well. The discard was a big tax, and I think I made some incorrect decisions trying to get that big attack to go. And there were some times when I would end up, especially late game, that I would really have awkward blocks. I'd have a bunch of blues in hand and a Wrecker Rump, and I can't block with 2 and use that Wrecker Rump because that is a 3-card attack. So I think I would cut that down. I think the Alpha Rampage is good. I like the Intimidate on it, but I think I would only have the 2 cards that require me to have a 3-card hand. Also, the pummels don't work with the claws. That makes that awkward. So that is another point in favor of just using the club. I'm not going to give up on this deck. I think that this deck has potential to be interesting. Rhinar's ability that gives you Intimidate when you discard a card with 6 or more power is interesting. But again, I had several turns that I am having them put cards aside, which is helpful and changes what they want to do with their blocks, but it still wasn't. They still get those cards back, and the backswing on those generally was not good for me. So yeah, we'll make some changes next time and see if we can't make this stronger and a bit more focused. I don't know if I'm going to focus more on Rhinar's ability, but I think it's probably going to be, I'm just going to focus less on that and see if I can't keep that consistent power more like my commoner decks did. So that's it for this week. Next week we have our Armory event is shifted to Friday, and that will be a sealed event, and we'll see you then. For now, this has been the Armory Report.